Welcome to the Everyday Board Game Podcast with Daniel.
And Daniel.
This is another one of our board game breakdowns. First one we've done in a long while, actually.
Yeah, we've been having a lot of issues between you starting a new job and me suffering from insomnia and everything in between.
Yeah, exactly. There's a whole bunch of shenanigans that have been happening. But no excuses. We are here. We are going to be breaking down some Richard Garfield games. Speaking of, let's talk about Richard Garfield real quick before we actually break down his games. What are your thoughts of him as a designer? What do you know about him?
Well, everybody knows him for one thing, for sure. Everybody, if they've heard of this game, they've heard of Richard Garfield, and that's Magic the Gathering.
Yep.
But for me personally, he really hit the map for me when it came to board gaming because of King of Tokyo. That's the first actual board game of his that I've paid attention to, and then of course Bunny Kingdom and Robo Rally and stuff like that. But it was King of Tokyo that put him on the map for me personally.
Okay. Yeah, Magic was definitely how he got on the map for me. I spent most of my middle school, all of my high school, and a little bit after playing Magic. I was competing in tournaments, I was part of the scene, trading cards, collecting. I still have probably about 30,000 cards or so. Yeah, I mean, give or take. I mean, I might be off a bit. I have a few sets from back in the day. I'm looking over at Nemesis, Exodus, Urza's Destiny, Apocalypse,
I got,
Unglued.
I got like a case that I wanted to see at one point in time, and like two of them, Magic the Gatherings, and I keep around for my wife. She likes it, but we've come to the realization, as much as we like Magic, we didn't like the community. That's why we really enjoy Keyforge, because it's just something that her and me can do. We don't have to do the deck building and stuff like that requires in Magic. So
yeah, definitely. Well, with our board game breakdowns, excuse me, what we like to do is we take a designer or a publisher or something. Sometimes we'll bring them on if we have a chance. I'm sure Richard Garfield is beyond busy because he's also a professor of mathematics, I believe, up in Seattle. So I might be wrong. I know it's northwest, but either way, I mean he was doing this long before making games, and he's still making games. So yeah, there's pretty much no way, but that's all right. And he's notorious for not doing too many interviews. I amongst my research, I only saw I think 2 or 3.
I think it's a big part of it too. It's because just like your really famous authors like Stephen King and stuff like that, when they hit that net threshold, that place where everybody wants to talk to them, it just becomes to the point where, are you actually doing an interview, or are you being a fanboy getting to talk to your favorite person? Right,
exactly. And so even though I've been playing his games for more than 20 years, that doesn't mean... I mean, I wouldn't call myself a fanboy. I mean, like, I'm impressed by his design, but now that I've gone into the board game side of it, I really like his board game design versus his card game design.
Yeah, but I think with him, it's like, I can understand where you're coming from, and I can understand where some other people who are doing this to try to either make a living or just do it for fun and put some content out there. It's also something that he needs to shy away from. He's trying to separate his personal life with his professional life, and doing less interviews.
Yep.
Is something.
Yeah, exactly. That's something that helps him. So let's
and
go
not to mention,
into it.
Since he's a mathematics professor, he's probably got a lot of like schooling hours that he's got to deal with office hours, talk to students, and if he's on dissertation boards, it's probably the pain in the butt.
Exactly. So I pulled up his Board Game Geek, and we're going to go over all of the main titles. As always with our board game breakdowns, we do not go into expansions, which, oh my goodness, does he have a lot of those.
So when we went through this, he had,
180 titles.
Yeah, there's 180 titles. Well, about half of those titles are Magic the Gathering promos or expansions.
Yeah, exactly. The vast majority of them. He hasn't made too many games outside of it, and even those he doesn't make expansions for him all that much. But he's pretty good at it, I mean, that's one thing he's known for. So, shall we jump into it?
Oh, let's go.
All right. So, I heard that this is a story of roughly how Magic became a thing. And so, I'm going to tell the story real quick from what I understand it. Let me minimize one of these windows real quick. I'm going to minimize our ugly face, so that way we don't have to worry about jumping to it.
Oh, lovely.
As soon as it's minimized. Cool. Alright, so, as I was saying, Richard Garfield, he came up with the game Robo Rally, which we're going to be talking about here in a minute. Then he approached a local publishing company called Wizards of the Coast. At the time, they were only making like books and like RPG manuals, and he wanted to make this big, fairly grandiose game with like modular tiles, cards that move these pewter pieces around. Excuse me. Moving these pieces around, a bunch of tokens, a bunch of like these pretty large components. And this company was only only used to making like manuals and books and some small things, right? Wizards of the Coast really wasn't a big thing. In fact, I think it was actually a local store at the time as well. So it wasn't really the publishing company that we know it today.
Yeah.
And so story has it that he approached him with Robo Rally, his creation, and they said, wow, that sounds really fun, but it's just a little bit big than what we can produce right now. Why don't you come up with something smaller and bring it back to us, and let's see if maybe we can make some money for that first. And then he went home and created Magic the Gathering. That's how the story goes. And that's why Magic is... And I'm pretty sure that that's been confirmed from a few places. But Magic the Gathering was definitely not his first game. Robo Rally was. But Magic was the first one that was published from him. So I have the back of Magic the Gathering right here. I know I've played it for many, many years. But one of the weird things that I'm going to point out... First off, Magic the Gathering Deckmaster. If you look at the back of every Magic the Gathering card, it says Deckmaster on it. Have you ever wondered about that, Daniel?
No, I never really thought anything about it.
Yeah, neither have I. Anyway, so no, Deckmaster, I guess, was it was a whole system that he created. That was the game, was Deckmaster, and
Okay.
Magic the Gathering was effectively like one of the chapters in Deckmaster.
Okay.
Now, that'll come into play later, but really, this was what set off everything. This was the Magic the Gathering craze, the collectible card game craze, the player versus player deck construction craze. Just about everything came from this small little one-off game that they weren't expecting it to be too big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And here's the funny story about Magic the Gathering. It is currently the only CCG that's still printing money. In essence, it's still making a lot of money. They've come and go, and you'll see here on this list, we have a lot of like earlier games for Richard Garfield were CCGs that we'll get into in a little bit, but this is the one that's still on a constant. So everything else pretty much defunct. There's maybe a few that are still moving on and going around, but this is one that's still alive.
Yeah, there's very few that have held the standard of this, and you were talking about it's the community, for every rough community that there is, there's a lot of players who really still get into it. Like me and my friends, for example, I have a good friend of mine, and he grew up playing Magic as well, and that's where him and I bonded. And so we'll still buy booster packs and play some decks from time to time, but that's because we're outside of that community. We're definitely not collecting anymore. We're not deck building. We don't really care about that too much, but it stands pretty solid as a fun game. It was completely different than anything that was at the time.
And the thing is, we're knocking the community a lot, and I don't want to make this a witch hunt against the Magic community,
right.
But there is a contingency in that group that makes it where it kind of at times can be a cesspool. I've seen it, and it's really bad when it comes to women in the industry, or not the industry, but the people who want to play it, the women that want to play it. They sometimes feel uncomfortable with some of the people in the community. They seem to be policing it a little bit better than they used to. And
right.
Wizards of the Coast is making a strong stance on that as well, so I'm giving them props on that. And the thing when you go with Magic the Gathering, and we haven't even discussed how the game works itself, we're just talking about the overall arching of this. There is no other game that I can think of off the top of our head, other than maybe Monopoly, that has this longevity.
Right.
That has been constantly in pulp culture, as well as still concurrently producing games for it or cards for it.
Right, exactly. I mean, I've told a story before where I used to do magic, like sleight of hand, prestidigitation, whatnot. And when people say it's like, "Oh, what's your hobby?" Magic. They would have to ask, is like, "Do you mean the card game or the hocus pocus stuff?" It's like, well, I mean, now that hocus pocus is a card game, well, now this is gonna make it more confusing. But
and,
no,
and not just that, the hocus pocus stuff. Magic the Gathering, you're magicians, you're wizards who
yeah,
are controlling, so it's still hocus
yeah,
pocus stuff.
exactly. That's why it's called Magic the Gathering. Exactly. No, I mean I have a lot of fond memories playing it. I've always enjoyed it. I still have a lot of fond memories for it. Talking about memorable moments, this top of the line. But if we're going to be talking about every game like this is going to take forever. So let's
So
get
let's move
moving.
on.
Yeah, if you don't know what Magic the Gathering is, maybe try it out. I don't know. It might not be for
Yeah.
you. But
So the next game on our list here is actually before the other game that you mentioned earlier, Robo Rally, is called Vampire: The Eternal Struggle. This is a game. It has an alternate name of Jihad with a Y instead of an I, so that kind of makes me go, hmm.
yeah,
It was
there's a
designed by
reason it
Richard.
changed its name.
Yeah, it was designed by Richard Garfield, Robert Goody, and L. Scott Johnson, and published by Wizards of the Coast. But I'm not familiar with this game. Are you?
Yeah, I was a little bit familiar with it. It was on my radar. It was another one of the games where uh it played very similar to Magic, but there was a big community for it because people were like, "Oh, well, vampires are really cool," and
Yeah, and I
it
think from what I'm reading in the description, the big part of it is because it's based off the Vampire the Masquerade role playing game.
right, exactly, which is now coming into a resurgence in a way.
Yeah, Renegade has been really pushing that a lot lately from what I've been seeing, so that's quite interesting.
Yep, and the card game has been re-implemented as well from a different company. So, and better art. But also, I want to point out real quick the fact on the bottom of this kind of reiterates my point. Bottom of the back of the card says Deckmaster on it. So you see what I mean about that following
So
along
the
the same
Deckmaster
trend.
was the system with the theming being different, was what you're trying to say.
Right. As far as I've understood it, yeah, that's how that's worked. But yeah,
Okay.
I haven't heard much about it. I mean, I heard it's okay and it definitely has its fan base, but it's another
Now,
one of those collectible card games.
now that I'm looking at some of the artwork on here, I have seen this before. I think my cousin, who was big into Anne Rice and vampires and that lore in the 90s, I think she had some of these growing up. And she didn't really play the game, but she liked the cards and with the RPG she did play. So I think I remember seeing some of this artwork before growing up younger because she was into that sort of goth style vampire issue.
Right. Yep, exactly. I like how it says right here, it was designed to avoid some of the flaws that Garfield found in Magic. Like VTES, which is the vampire game, does not require you to include resource or mana cards in your deck. And cards are instantly replaced when played, meaning that card draw isn't as important as knowing when to play cards. Yeah.
Huh, that's pretty
Or when
interesting.
to discard a card to sculpt a better hand. So you can see like he already was improving the system, which we will be talking about much more here in about 20 years later after we get to there.
Yeah.
Let's move on to Robo Rally, which was the first non-collectible board game that he
It
printed.
probably the only one you're gonna see for a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Uh, so, well, with the exception of Great Dalmoody, which we'll talk about, but
Yeah.
Robo Rally. So this has been on my radar. I finally have a copy. I bought it probably about 2 years ago, and I still haven't played it yet, which is ridiculous because I've been wanting it for God knows how many years. But the idea of Robo Rally is very simple. You are robots, and you are playing cards to program those robots to get to a certain objective. Normally, it's like capture a flag or get to a number of those stations by before anybody else. Sometimes in order, sometimes elsewise. The big thing with this is that you're playing program cards number of turns in a row, which are simple as like move forward 2 spaces or turn clockwise or move backwards, and you're trying to position your robot to do that as effectively as possible. The problem that a lot of people have with it is the fact that if one person pushes or shoots you out of position, well then the rest of your programming code is moot, is what a lot of people say. I mean, it's definitely mean. I've never had a problem with it personally, but yeah. Either way, I understand like how it works. I can see why this has definitely been popular. I know why I've been wanting it, but yeah, this has been overall a pretty neat looking experience. I just wish I could play it still, because most people haven't played it yet. So maybe I'll make my kids play it. And now we are going to be moving on to the Great Dalmoody.
Huh.
Which
Great Dalmoody.
I
know nothing about this.
Okay, I'll go ahead and explain it. It is a non-collectible card game. It is a trick-taking game.
Huh, okay.
Yeah, it's actually a really incredibly popular trick-taking game. A lot of people consider this like the best trick-taking game. But it's a ladder climbing game with a pyramid deck. So,
okay.
Yeah, so it says the 80 card commercial deck contains cards ranked 1 to 12 with 2 jesters, which are jokers effectively. Each card bears a number, which is not only its rank, but also tells you how many cards that exist. So 12 12s, 11 11s, etc. And so the deck is dealt out, and all the players, their object is to get rid of their cards. So it's ladder climbing, effectively.
Yeah.
All the cards need to be either the same rank, or I think they could be played in as a better rank for somebody else, or pass. And it continues until everybody's passed, at which point the cards are cleared, and the last person who played cards continues. So this, like, actually, there's very few games that actually had this style amongst it. And the fact that it's a pyramid deck plus ladder climbing is awesome. Like, I could see why a lot of people ask for it. In fact, just the other day, my boss over at the comic shop actually asked me, he was like, hey, somebody's asking for the Great Dalmoody. Are you familiar with that game? I was like, yeah, but holy cow. Like, this hasn't been played forever, you know?
Yeah, it's quite old. It's, what, 95?
Yep, 95. And this was from Wizards of the Coast. Yeah, exactly. No, and I've heard of it. And you'll see right there, I'm going to briefly touch base on this. You'll see that it was re-implemented by Dilbert Corporate Shuffle.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to talk about that real quick because I actually do own Dilbert Corporate Shuffle. And it's titled as a Great Dalmoody game. And it's funny because it takes the humor of Dilbert, but you're basically just playing the Great Dalmoody. But there are some special cards. Certain ones have abilities, like Dogbert. You can mess other people up. So it's a silly little thing, but I like it. It's a little cool variation on that.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Other than the fact that I never found Dilbert funny.
Yeah, I was one of those weird people who did.
Though I always joked. I always liked the joke on the Drew Carey show. If you remember that back in the day, that he looked a lot like Dilbert.
Yeah.
Man, did he?
Yeah, he really did. I loved how they would play into it.
So the next game on the list here that I have, and I think you have it as well, is Netrunner.
Uh-huh.
And so this one is re-implemented, we'll get onto it a little bit later, of Android Netrunner. It's another Richard Garfield design, 2-player card game, if I'm looking at it correctly, with a cyberpunk theme on it.
Yeah.
But again, and you're going to hear this a lot from me, this is another one of the CCGs that I'm not familiar with because I don't really play CCGs. The most recent one, I guess you consider a CCG that I've gotten into is the living card game of Ark of Horror. That's about it. That's pretty much my CCG knowledge.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I get why it didn't go or didn't become popular because you're playing as either the Corp or the Runners. basically you're hackers, right?
Yeah.
And the problem that I had with this is not the game itself, but the fact that your deck of cards was called something differently depending on which side you were. And that was immediately confusing for everybody. It's like either the stack and the heap for the runner, or the archives and the R&D, I think, for the corp. And
Yeah.
and like CCGs aren't exactly the easiest thing to teach in the first place, but the fact that it's that you add that extra layer of, oh, well, technically it makes you feel like you're playing two different games, or I'm teaching two times as many games because I'm having to explain the differences between them. But really, all you're doing is you're just trying to play some hacks against the corp. The corp is trying to block this stuff and then score them for points. In a nutshell, that's all it is. But because of that convolution that they added with it, it made it tricky.
Yeah, and I get that. Again, I like the cyberpunk theme. I think it's an amazing theme. I love the hacker theme. One of my favorite guilty pleasure movies is Hackers. Even though it's horrible, horrible movie, it's guilty pleasure.
It's so bad, but it's so good. Hack the planet. Yeah, no, I love that movie.
But this never, even the reimplementation with Android Netrunner, it just never really got me into it. You know what I mean?
Right. Exactly. All right. So viewers at home can see my loading icon. For some reason, my Firefox is running incredibly slow, and it's not loading up the next screen. So we're just gonna kind of hang out for a minute.
Yeah, right. Sounds good.
Yeah, this is awkward. I mean, I can tell you the title of what the next one is. It's the BattleTech CCG.
Oh, look, another CCG I knew nothing about. Again, Richard Garfield designer, as well as the publishers, Wizards of the Coast.
Yep.
I'll go ahead and start it while we wait on you.
Yep, go ahead.
Oh, wait, mine just froze up now.
Yay! Hooray for freezing.
Technology. All right, here we go. So, BattleTech is set in the BattleTech universe. It's a collectible card game that has each player customizing their deck with mechs, vehicles, 5 types of resources, and characters and locations from the BattleTech universe. And so, basically what it's saying, it plays similar to Magic. You draw a card, you play a card, you tap a resource, and you build.
Yep.
You keep doing that until you build your units. Once units are built, they can attack other opponents' units, resources, or the deck. Each point of damage to the deck scraps a card from it. Once a player deck runs out, he loses the game. So this basically, what it sounds like to me is one of the losses in Magic the Gathering is if you have no cards to draw, you lose.
Yep.
This is forcing that end of card draw where you have to start scrapping cards.
Yeah, which actually sounds kind of cool.
Yeah, it actually doesn't sound too bad. Apparently, there were several expansions to the sets, including Mech Warriors, Counter-Strike, Mercenaries, Arsenals, Commanders, and Crusades. And so it's interesting in that you can actually download a compendium. They have a link of it if somehow you guys have these cards and you found a set where you can play. Of the BattleTech card list, there is a downloadable link for you.
That's cool.
At the very bottom.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to see like all of the old fans like still supporting the games as best as they can. That's always one thing I did like about the whole scene.
Yeah, the only issue I have with BattleTech is it looks like the artwork's a little, but again, it's 90s.
Yeah.
And it's text heavy. I mean, I'm looking at one of the, like 2 of the cards here, and it's just like half the card is all text.
Yeah. See, I can't help but think that part of this was just it. If you didn't know Magic, this would be more difficult to learn. Magic being one of the more simpler ones. I mean, I can't help but think that why it's so text heavy is just because they expect players to know Magic and they probably use a lot of lingo.
Well, yeah,
vice versa.
I mean, you got to look at the fact that this came out 3 years after Magic, so
yeah,
and that's when Magic blew up. And I see we're still frozen on BattleTech. Your computer broke on us. Huh?
Yep, my computer done broke.
So we're just gonna run with it.
Okay.
And I'm just going to keep going. Next game on my list here is Xena Warrior Princess CCG. This was made in 1998 by designers Charlie Catino, Mike Davis, Scaff Alias, Richard Garfield. And there's 3 more. I'm waiting for that to load up, but let's see if that's ever going to happen.
Yep.
And I'll tell you this. I was watching a video last night where they were making a joke about Xena Warrior Princess, which led to somebody's puberty starting early. And I'm not going to lie, that was pretty much the same for me because I had a big crush on Lucy Lawless.
Yeah, here's a really off the wall fact. You know who Bruce Campbell is, right?
Yeah,
Star of Evil Dead, Army of Darkness.
yeah,
Apparent.
he's actually one of my favorite TV shows.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Burn Notice.
Oh yeah, yeah. I've heard he's good in that one. I haven't seen it yet. I considered watching
Oh,
it just for him. I'm a huge fan.
oh,
I
he's hilarious in it.
I listened to his autobiography, and uh, like Hail to the Chin, I think is the name of. Oh
Yeah,
no,
yeah, yeah,
Behind the
yeah.
Chin. That's what it is. And he talked about Xena Warrior Princess, and he was a producer on it, and he would go and help film it. Same with Hercules. Um, yeah, all sorts of different things. He had a big hand in a lot of what was going on in the show, except for like credits. He didn't have that.
Huh.
All right.
So the other three on Xena the Warrior Princess is Joe Grace, Jim Lynn, and Joel Mick. So there is 7 designers on this CCG.
Oh wow. So yeah, it was a big collaboration, I'm sure.
Yeah, so it's a big one. So the way it works, apparently, it's part. It doesn't even give me much of a description here. It's a resource management collectible card game which features popular characters, settings, and episodes from the television series with actual screen captures. That's its entire description for it. I'm looking at it, and it's weird because if you look at the cover for Xena the Warrior Princess, if you didn't pay attention to it, it looks like Magic the Gathering.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I'm surprised it doesn't say Deckmaster on it. I mean,
It doesn't because it uses a different system from what I understand, from what I read in another part of it, where it uses the ARC system.
oh,
And
that
if
makes
you see
sense.
it at the top of the
Oh
corner
yeah,
of the cover,
the
it
ARC
says it uses
system, huh?
the ARC system.
That's cool. And it used screen caps and whatnot. Yeah, it looks like it would be all right. I mean, I'd be willing
Yes.
to play it. I wasn't a huge fan of the show, but if you ever got a starter deck, let me know and we'll play it.
Yeah, see, I was a fan of the show growing up. I told you, Xena, I had a crush on Lucy Lawless, also the character Gabrielle, too. But also, I'm into mythology. I was a history major at one point in time, so this and Hercules were shows that I was looking forward to and always watching with my dad, so there's good memories with it.
Right. So the other one that we skipped by real quick, and that's because there was a re-implement later on, was What Were You Thinking?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And it's a party game from Wizards of the Coast, later re-implemented as Hive Mind. But the description is very straightforward, and it tells you exactly how the game plays. A party game where you try to guess the most popular answers to questions, not necessarily the correct ones.
And here's a funny thing. It won the Origins Award for Best Abstract Board Game in 1998.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't technically have a theme, right?
Yeah.
Hive Mind would more, but... Oh, Origins. Silly, silly Origins.
So, the next game on my list is Twitch.
Yep, same
Thought
as
we
mine.
were on Twitch.
Oh, the Zing. I see what you did there.
Alright, so Twitch here that I have on the list here is a game designed by Scaff Elias and Richard Garfield and Jim Lynn. Again, they worked together on the Xena game. There are 3 of the 7 that worked on that game. And this one is an insanely frantic game of reaching to new information. When someone plays a card, you must quickly determine if it points to you, e.g., if the player to your right plays a card that says left, and if it does, throw the top card of your deck onto the pile. If you're not quick enough, another player will call you out, and you'll have to take all the cards in the pile onto your deck. The first person to run her deck out wins. So, in essence, what this sounds like to me is almost like an Uno clone where you're trying to get rid of your cards, but if someone calls you out, you have to draw up more cards. Yeah, I don't know if I would like this.
Yeah, I don't think you would. I would probably enjoy it. It sounds more like Egyptian Rat Screw or like Slapjack or something like that for me. But yeah, or also like it's one of those response games. That's weird that it's like if it points to you. That's an interesting.
Yeah, it's an interesting mechanic, but we're trying not to drag this out. We've done some off the topic stuff, so let's keep moving on.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of Twitch, pecking order. I don't even know what that means, but also by Richard Garfield, printed not by Wizards of the Coast. I want to point that out because it's Games Magazine, Immortal Eyes Games, and Winning Moves Games. So, this is pecking order known as Auf de Palme, I think, or Into the Palm Tree. This is a reference to the German proverb to bring someone into the palm tree. Okay, that clarified it. It is a card game by Richard Garfield and George Elias. Oh, it doesn't say that under his credits. That's weird. Two players fight it out with 12 birds of varying values, trying to claim the best 10 feeding locations in the palm of a hand. Oh, palm tree. I see what they did there. There's the palm
I'm
pun.
running a little bit slow on here, so let's see what happens.
Since the only bird is allowed at one space at a time, there's a competition. The object of the game is to cleverly place your birds, bluff, and not cheat, even if the engaging theme makes you want to. The player who claims the best feeding spaces is the winner. I mean, it seems simple. I would be willing to try it. I mean, it looks like it's one of those games where, yeah, mine just went through a freeze as well. It looks like it's one of those simple, like you have a stack of cards, you're just trying to play the best ones at the best time.
Yeah.
It says that it's also hand management, bluffing, and a little bit of rock, paper, scissors as well.
Interesting. I don't know how I feel about this one, to be truthfully honest.
Yeah, I don't blame you on that. I don't blame you whatsoever. It could be good. I mean, maybe. If I had it, if I see it in the store, I'll probably pick it up just to try it out.
Yeah, same. Just to try it out, but honestly, this one, out of all the ones we've talked about, this BattleTech looks more interesting than this.
Yeah. What about Twitch? Does Twitch seem more interesting?
No, I'd probably play this before I play Twitch.
That's fair. That's your low rung, huh?
So far, Twitch is my low rung, yeah.
All right.
So the next game on my list, and I'm glad I get to talk about it because I already talked about the other one, is the Hercules, the living. Is it the living card game? Is that what it's called? Like Legend Journey, the Legend Journeys trading card game.
Ah, very cool.
It's another game in the Arc system. It's a light version of Magic the Card game, is what it says here, and it's compatible with Xena the Warrior Princess and another game that we'll talk about a little bit later called C23. The game is very similar but not identical to Magic. Each player begins with a deck of exactly 40 cards. You win when your opponent has no cards left to draw. So in a sense, like how BattleTech worked, where it's once someone's out of a deck, they're done. On your turn, you play resources, which come in red, which are direct damage, green, which is combat, and blue, which is manipulation. You use these resources to summon creatures or cast spells with the goal of running your opponent out of cards. On your turn, you do the following order. You untap your creature, heroes, or resource. You draw a card. You play a resource. You use a resource in play by, tapping them to pay for the cost of the card in your hand to put in play. Attack with any heroes you have in play. And then it passes to the other player and continues until the winner empties his opponent's straw deck. Although compatible with C23 and Xena, all three sets have different backs, which makes mixing less useful than you might hope.
Yeah, I love how it's like, they are completely compatible. They're not. But only if you ignore the backs of the cards, which I'm pretty sure Wizards was selling sleeves at that point.
What would interest me about this is that it says it's compatible. So what if you had a deck of Hercules and you take it up against a deck of Xena? They're not mixed or anything like that, so you just have a deck versus deck. I think that would make it an interesting game.
Yeah.
As well as if you play in can Hercules beat whatever the heck C23 is?
Yeah. Yeah. So speaking of C23, why don't we jump to that? My computer's still beyond frozen.
Yeah. Okay. So C23, another massive game that's collaborated as of the Xena one and the Hercules one. This has got Richard Garfield, Mike Davis, Scaff Elias, Charlie Catino, and three others that I don't want to pull up because my computer is being weird. And it basically says, a game very similar to Magic the Gathering. This theme has changed to sci-fi. The number of colors and cards reduced, but the mechanics are still there. So it's basically a sci-fi version of the Xena and the Hercules games with their own artwork into it. They're not pulling from a TV show or something like that.
So it's not it's not IP based.
Yeah, it's their own IP that can combine with the other two IP games.
There we go. Hercules just loaded. Fantastic. Cool.
Oh, this is going to be a fun video to edit.
I know. Well, I mean, I might just have to restart here in a bit. We'll see. I wanted to talk about Filthy Rich, though. because Filthy Rich looks absolutely awesome. I've seen this from time to time before. It's incredibly rare now. But what makes this game different is it's a card game, but it utilizes binders. Huh? Shocker. Yeah. No, but it comes with binders. Card binders from Ultra Pro that have 4 pages on it, and I don't know how many per page. Maybe I think it's actually the full 9-sheet card panels that you would get when collecting cards, and you're actually utilizing those binders as a mechanism, like which is awesome. So it says, Filthy Rich is a card game that is played with a binder and 4 pages of Ultra Pro card protector pages. Players launch business billboards in the form of cards that get placed in the pages. If the number rolled on the business dice corresponds to your billboard, you get paid. Income is spent to acquire luxuries, and the first player to own 3 luxuries wins. However, luxuries and businesses have a tax that is due during randomly triggered taxing phase. If you cannot pay your taxes, you must liquidate your empire. Special cards and events add to this fun and light game. So, like, I know we've given guff to Dice City. Is that the one where it's like bingo with dice?
Yes.
But this uses it in like a customable card form. Like you have binder sheets, and it makes columns where you can actually do that. That's intriguing.
It's yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say no to playing it, but it's not something that I'm going to go out of my way to look for. You know what I mean?
Right. I totally get you. I don't blame you on that. If I find this in the wild for not too expensive, let's see how much they're selling it for. Oh, well, $31 or $27 I see for very good condition on Board Game Geek. That's not bad. I would totally want to try this. Yeah. Alright, so that was Filthy Rich, and there was C23. Let's go on to the next one. You're a sports ball fan.
So NBA Showdown, huh?
Yep. 2002. I'm pretty sure that was the only set that they printed.
So the NBA Showdown is 2001 by Richard Garfield and the Wizard of the Coast. And here's the thing about this one. I'm a sports ball fan. This is the one sport I'm not a fan of.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the way this works is, from its description, because I know nothing about this game, is that it's a trading card game and is notable for its fast play, accomplished by avoiding a shot-by-shot mechanism, instead of having a quarter-by-quarter roll for each player. This gives the players points, assists, and rebounds. Additionally, each player has the speed and power rating, which factors into their matchups and can get hot or cold, which I see what they're trying to do here. They're trying to get the implementation of the fast pace that a sports game will do for you.
Right.
Players do get hot, players do get cold, but the quarter-by-quarter roll for each player is kind of confusing to me. I don't understand what they're... I know basketball itself is played in 4 quarters, at least in the professional league.
Well, what it's saying is that it doesn't focus on the quarter per quarter. It's just every time you're playing like a set of cards, it's a single shot.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know how I'd feel. I don't know if this would re-implement basketball all that well. It doesn't seem like it does it very well.
No.
Other than the hot or cold mechanism into it. But yeah, dice rolling and hand management. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about this one. What I think would be interesting about this when you're going for that shot-to-shot type thing is if you're doing, like, bottom of the ninth, the baseball game that I have over here that I haven't played yet, but I'm going to. But it implements a team walking it off and winning it in the 9th inning while the pitching team is trying to close the game out, in essence.
Yeah.
What they could do for this, if they're going to go for that shot-for-shot and trying to win the game, is what they should do is what they do in soccer. It's called the penalty kicks, where one player is the goalie, one player is a kicker, a group of kickers, and they're trying to surpass the goalie to win the game. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So I think that would probably be more intriguing implementation, but soccer or football, as it's known around the rest of the world, just doesn't fly here in America.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I get that. I mean, I think they were just given an opportunity. They're like, hey, you can use the NBA license. We want you to make a collectible card game, since collectible games are all the hotness right now. And and they probably just...
early 2000s were all about the CCGs.
Yeah, exactly. They were all about it. I mean, there was CCGs. I have like about 7 or 8 collectible card games that I just have like the starter set on my shelf of shame, just because they intrigue me. I like
There's,
playing the old defunct games.
there is one that we've talked about that I do want to get, I do want to own, just because I love that series, and I want to get the Babylon 5 collectible card game just to have it. I don't
Yeah,
even care if it's a crappy game. I just wanted to have it.
yeah. The fact that they made a game about it, and therefore,
Yeah,
yeah.
I need it in my life. Yeah.
And great transition, because speaking of space theme, our next one is Star Wars: The CCG, or a trading card game, not collectible card game. Sorry,
Yeah,
you're not
yeah,
allowed to
trading
collect
card
this.
game.
You can only trade it. Um, so Star Wars, yeah. I mean, it's just another one of the CCGs. This one was pretty popular. They made it all the way up, even through the Clone Wars, through the newer series.
Well, the thing is with the Clone Wars, this game came out when those were starting to air. Those were coming out.
Right,
The prequels, as they were, started in '99, and I want to say ended in like 2005, 2006.
right, yeah,
So
exactly.
that's when this was alive.
And then, therefore, yeah, it's an epic struggle between good and evil, and you must now take a side, the light side or the dark side. So one player is playing as light, one is playing as dark. I don't know if that's true every time.
Otherwise known as Jedi and Sith.
Yeah, well, yeah, but I wonder if that's true each time. It says, for your first real game, you'll need to collect or print out 2 decks of 60 cards, a set of 6-sided dice, damage counters, 2 force meter. Yeah, so you need the minimum 2 decks, and they have to be each side, I believe. That's intriguing, because then it might encourage people to make 2 decks that they would want to focus on to be that good. Like,
And what's funny about this one is I'm actually familiar with this LCG. I never played it, but I knew people who just collected the cards because they're that big in Star Wars, and I would go out of my way and probably start collecting this if I can find them, just because I'm that big of a Star Wars fan. Star Wars is probably one of my favorite series. Never played this game though.
I think I know a place that has probably about a couple thousand cards that might be for cheap. I'll let you know.
All right, sounds good.
All right, and we'll learn how to play it. In
Yeah,
fact,
there we go.
one of my friends who goes to the store fairly often, he plays this all the time, and he has just about every card from it. And I guess he's a big fan of it, so that might be worth reaching out to him to see if we can learn how to play it. But let's
It
get
wouldn't be a bad idea. But
exactly.
Yeah, no, I dig Star Wars. This intrigues me. I want to see how it works.
Now you'll have to forgive me. Is Trendsetters not the next one, right?
Trendsetter's the next one on my list.
It is? Okay, great.
Yeah.
So I did put it in the right place. So Trendsetters. Can you predict the trends of your friends? That's a good tagline. I like that. Here is a party game that tests your ability to stay with the mainstream. Players use their voting wheels to register secret votes on poll questions. The object is to select the most popular choice and stay in the mainstream. After revealing their answers, players who are not in the mainstream get a strike. First player to receive 5 strikes on his or her scoring wheel pays a penalty for being passé. The group chooses a penalty before the play begins, such as clucking like a chicken or singing I Write the Songs by Barry Manilow. So, that's interesting. It's dumb, but I like that idea of setting, you have to set the punishment for the one loser of the game.
Yeah, that intrigues me. It also, I don't know how I feel about that. I
Yeah.
like party games. Don't get me wrong. This one, I don't know.
Well, I mean, that would be kind of fun. It's like, oh, well, you have to talk out of your rear like Ace Ventura. It's like, so that would give you a pretty good incentive to try hard.
Nobody wants to see my butt. Let me tell you this.
Agreed. So therefore, we would all make sure that you wouldn't lose. I mean, that's a silly idea. I get it, but it's also rated 4.8, and it seems very similar to like Hive Mind and the other one that we were talking about.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. Oh, I skipped the game. Hold on, let me fix
All right,
this.
our next one is Rocketville, which I'll let you go ahead and talk about.
1 second, my computer's a little frozen. All right, there we go.
All right, sounds good.
Rocketville was designed by Richard Garfield, published by Avalon Hill. and it came out in 2006. And it's funny, before we get into the game itself, Avalon Hill, their logo drives me insane because it looks like the History Channel logo.
It really does. It really, really does. I have a collectible card game made by the History Channel over here, and yeah, I can see the comparison.
Oh, I think I know what you're talking about. It's one where the different warriors fight each other, right?
Yeah, Anachronism.
Yeah. I actually wanted to try it. I heard it's really bad, but I want to try it.
Well, I have a couple decks, so you let me know, and we will definitely play.
Alright, so the way this game is described, and this is from the publisher, it's a retro future hometown USA known as Rocketville. There's no greater honor or privilege than holding the office of mayor. And so the goal of this game is that it's a fast game of luck and strategy. You travel from district to district via rockets. You campaign for votes, making promises and garnering endorsements, recruiting robot assistants, and a mad dash to win the popular vote in the game. So basically, it's a voting game. It's a political game in essence.
Mm-hmm.
It actually intrigues me a little bit. This sounds interesting because you're basically campaigning. I don't know how well I would do, but I don't know how the campaigning mechanism actually works.
Yeah, it's flown under the radar, but I've heard it's pretty fun, and I definitely love the aesthetic of it. The cover of it is just absolutely fantastic. If you're watching the video, you can see it right now of the guy campaigning to a bunch of robots. I love that.
And it's cool. But doesn't the logo for its name remind you of another game? On just the box color and everything?
Yes, but I can't tell you off the top of my head which one.
Welcome to.
Oh, yeah, Welcome to. Well, I mean, it's kind of like the future retro style,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, it's kind of like that Fallout style where they're in the future but still stuck in the 1950s. I actually dig that kind of, what's the word I'm looking for here? Not theme, but ambiance.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with you. This one has been on my radar. I do want to try it, but we'll see. I mean, it's only rated a 5.1, which is not incredible. All right, the next one that we're going to go on to is Stonehenge. So this is a really weird thing. I'm only going to briefly talk about it because Stonehenge is called an anthology board game. And the idea of it is that you're given completely different pieces. This was designed, co-designed from Richard Garfield, Richard Borg, James Ernest, Bruno Faiduti, and Mike Selinker, all names that we are definitely familiar with. And the idea this company wanted to do was to create a board game system using these pieces. And the idea is that they gave these pieces to these designers and said, we want you to come up with a game for it that would work. And so some of them might have made an auction game, some of them might have been an area control game, some of them might have done this. And the idea was to have all these great minds coming up with a cool system. So a magic game is by Richard Garfield, where you're using them like little spells and stuff. Like Bruno Faiduti uses political, James Ernest is auction, Richard Borg is battle, and Mike Selinker is science fiction, which makes a lot of sense. You know, with all those designers, that all makes sense. And I think what ended up happening is they had like contests for like other people to make games for it, and they wanted to create this huge, massive system and make something really cool with it, but it ended up just kind of making it so every game wasn't that great. Now,
exactly.
I've played a couple of the games in here, and I actually did enjoy them, but it's not anything groundbreaking. And I have the expansion for it, which is the most useless expansion box I've ever seen in my life. It's like it makes IDW seem like they are filling their boxes to the brim. It was pathetic. So anyway, that was Stonehenge. I'm a proud owner of it, and I'm not sure why.
Alright, with that, let's take a quick break.
Okay.
I have to fix something for my dinner.
Alright, sounds good. We're going to take a very quick break, and we'll be back in a moment.
I just lost something here.
Alright. It says that we are recording, so let's continue. We took a very quick break, and now we are going to be moving on to Let's Jet.
So, Let's Jet here is a game implemented by Richard Garfield and published by Simply Fun. And I know nothing about it, so let's go with the description. For the game rules for basic games, you draw 3 public cards from the travel deck and place them directly on the map. Deal each player 4 travel cards and give each player a jet pawn and a scoring chip. Each player chooses one of their cards as their starting location and put their jet pawn on that city. Put the card they chose in front of that player to begin a scoring pile, and put their scoring chip on one on the scoring track. On the player's turn, they can their jet can make 2 hops as measured using the distance ruler. Each time a player stops in a city shown on a public card, and one of their own travel cards, they take that card and add it to their scoring pile. Then move their scoring chip to the scoring track. And the advanced game features additional rules for the event cards, bonus abilities awarded for a complete set of 3 cards of the same color, and co-pilot cards awarded when another player visits a travel card you're holding.
That's cool.
That's pretty much it.
Yeah, I mean, it's very simple looking.
And there is a sequel to it. I didn't pull it up on myself, but it's called Let's Drive.
Yep.
Instead of Let's Jet.
And I'll briefly look through the listing here to see if it's much different. Looks like it's just about the same thing.
It's driving rather than or flying.
Yeah, exactly. Each time a player stops on a city known as a public card or one of their own destinations, they add that to their face-up scoring track. Cool. So it's not route building. It's point-to-point movement and set collection. Cool.
Yeah.
I mean, I've always loved games with maps on it. I don't know what it is, but there's something I've noticed that almost every game that I have that has like a US map on it, I've really enjoyed. And I don't know why that is, why like all those themes kind of work together, but it's such a cool system for implementing a board and an area control and whatever, you know? I think it's cool.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. I mean, it looks okay. It looks a little too simple for my taste, but
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't say no to trying it.
But then again, you and I both like Ticket to Ride, and that's probably simpler than this even.
True, but Ticket to Ride, there's a lot of strategy that you could do in that game. And
Agreed.
Be smart about how you do it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I just think this is intriguing. So
No, don't get me wrong. I don't disagree with you on that fact. I think it's just, for me, I think it's going to be too simple. You know what I mean? When you compare it to, say, something like Ticket to Ride, even though the mechanisms are simple, there's still a lot of strategy in this one. All you're doing is basically hopping and trying to collect cards.
Yeah, exactly. So speaking of area control, which we weren't, let's go on to the big smash hit that really kind of put Richard Garfield back into the limelight of game creators. And this is my opinion.
I mentioned it earlier. This is the one that actually put him on my map completely about board gaming designing, because I knew of him through card gaming, but I didn't really pay attention to a lot of his stuff because he's the Magic guy, and I just wasn't into Magic.
Right,
when this
exactly.
came around, I played this, and I'm like, oh my god, this is actually quite fun.
Yeah, so why don't you take it then, and we'll talk about King of New York after that.
All right, so King of Tokyo is re-implemented twice. King of New York changes some things, and we'll talk about it on there, as well as King of Tokyo Dark, where it's basically a darker game. There are some rule tweaks in it. I don't know too much about it, but I do own this version that you're seeing here, the second edition of King of Tokyo.
Mm-hmm.
And the way this works is you're playing, I forget what they're called, kaiju. You're playing different variations of kaijus who have special abilities, if you get the power-up decks and stuff like that. But you're collecting energy to get powers. You're trying to get to 20 victory points. Or be the last monster standing. That's the 2 ways to win. You get 20 victory points, be the first one to do it, or be the last monster standing. What happens is you're going to be rolling a set of dice a la Yahtzee. You're going to keep the ones that you want to keep and re-roll everything else until you get what you want. They have 6 symbols on them. The 1, the 2, the 3. A 1, a 2, or a 3. Victory points, energy, heal, and attack. After you do your successive rolls, whatever's left is what you're doing. And you got to be careful, because if you attack, you go into Tokyo if no one's in it. If you're attacking someone in Tokyo, they can jump out and force you in there. So you want to try to time when you go into Tokyo. But you're also beholden to the dice roll. If you roll attack on your 3rd row, you're just going to have to do whatever happens. If they decide to stay, good. You do a little damage to them. If they decide to jump out and take that damage, you're forced to go into Tokyo.
Yep.
And I enjoy this game. I go back and forth if I like King of New York more, King of Tokyo more, because I see it like this. King of New York is the version of the game for gamers. There's a lot more going on. There's stuff that you get to destroy within the city. There's military that's fighting you as well. Whereas King of Tokyo is so simple. It's such a lucky game, but it's such a family-like game that you can play with a younger audience, because all you're doing is fighting for control of Tokyo. That's really all you're doing in this game. And I've had fond memories of playing this game. I've had fond memories of playing King of New York, and I thoroughly enjoyed this game.
Yeah, this is a neat one. It's always been one of the best ones to bring families into gaming. It's a fantastic gateway game because anybody who's familiar with Yahtzee picks it up in a second. Anybody who's
Yeah,
not familiar with Yahtzee picks it up in 2 seconds.
yeah,
It's a simple
it's real
idea.
simple. And what I like about it is the price point too. It's not a very expensive game. The most expensive component in it really is the dice because they're unique dice. And you have, I think it's 6 black dice, and then you have like 2 special power dice that can help you. But you can get them. You can earn them in different ways.
Yeah.
And I think those are like green or something like that. But you
Hmm.
also got the abilities that give you a certain power, or if you roll a certain amount of numbers, like a 1, 2, 3, all the way through, or something like that.
Yep.
One of every die. If you have that card, you automatically win the game, or something like that.
Yeah. And this also, I feel like this put Yellow on the map as far as America goes because this
Yeah,
was printed by Yellow in France and in America here, and now it has 32 publishers.
hmm I don't disagree. This really was Richard Garfield's next big hit. I would have to say.
Yeah.
He had Magic the Gathering that put him on the map, and then he made this game, and it just take. He went from that card game designer to wow, that board game designer.
Yeah, exactly. This is one of those ones where if I'm talking about Richard Garfield to somebody who doesn't know who he is, if they play card games, I say Magic. If they play board games, I say King of Tokyo. Because
Exactly.
this is so true and true. It was featured on tabletop and it's been popular ever since.
And the fact that it's in a second edition, well, actually a third edition, if you want to consider Dark a third edition,
Sure?
as well as a sequel in a sense with King of New York.
Yeah, exactly. So how is King of New York different?
So the way King of New York works is it pretty much plays the same. You're trying to be the King of New York, and I think the center part of the map is like Manhattan or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But you're all in these outlying bureaus. The only issue is in this one, the humans are trying to fight back. So they got jets and they got tanks, and you're fighting them as well as the tanks. And there's bad dice this time. So if you roll, I forget what it is, but the city starts attacking you.
Yeah.
And so you can get every monster within a certain area starts getting damage from the tanks and the jets and stuff like that in that area because the military is fighting back. It plays pretty much the same way. First to 20 victory points or last monster standing wins. But the first time I ever played this game, and I love this one because the first time I ever played it, we all lost because the military destroyed us. So there is a possibility of everybody losing because of the military, whereas in King of Tokyo, there is a possibility of someone always winning. So I kind of like that aspect of it. I thought it was funny. We had a good time. The military was just like, oh no, these monsters aren't taking over New York.
Yeah, yeah. It was silly, although a lot of people. I mean, that doesn't even sell compared to how much this sells. This is like I think up to 10 million copies sold.
Yeah,
Some
something like that.
some
Well, I mean,
extreme
King of
amount.
Tokyo sold really well too. That's why it's in a second edition. And the main reason that I know that King of Tokyo went into a second edition is people wanted more like brighter pop than the original one, and it implemented some different rules, slight changes. Other than that, they're pretty much the same, except for with King of New York, you have the military fighting you
Yeah.
as well. And
The,
certain parts of the map give you more victory points. So like if you're in that center island, the lower part only gives you like 1 or 2, whereas the higher part, if you move up, gives you 3 victory points at the start of your turn if you're still in the city.
yeah. Yeah, I've noticed that I like King of Tokyo better, but I'm not the hugest fan. But
Yeah.
one thing that I did notice about King of New York that I do really like is that Manhattan, when you first go into it, it's not that big of a deal. But the longer you stay in it, it actually gives you more and more points
Yeah.
as you're doing
And
it.
so the best way to describe King of New York versus the King of Tokyo is King of Tokyo is the family game, King of New York is the gamer game.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot more strategy that you have to take care of and look for in this game. The problem is you're still beholden to the luck of the dice roll.
Yep, exactly. So, yeah, King of Tokyo, good for them, good for Richard Garfield, good for Yellow. Let's talk about. I'm going to talk about the re-implement of Android Netrunner, just very briefly, because we did talk about Netrunner.
Yeah.
And I have a hard time saying just Netrunner and not Android Netrunner because
It really changed it.
yeah, it really changed it. It's still by Richard Garfield, but it was remade from Fantasy Flight, and this was one of the first living card games that they made, where they took out the idea of random booster packs and the collectivity of it, because they had what was called data packs, and that was a pack of about 60 cards, and each of those 60 cards, there was 3 copies of 20 different cards, and you knew exactly what you were getting. There was never random. If you wanted this card for your deck, you knew which data pack to buy to put it in your deck. They re-implemented it, and they also put it in the Android universe, which we talked to Kevin Wilson about, that it was his creation of this massive, steampunk, cyberpunk style game, and they took this game about hacking and turned it into that same universe. So they put amazing artwork on it. I think that, personally, this is probably one of my favorite artwork from anything Fantasy Flight has made, was Netrunner. I think the cards are absolutely gorgeous. And the graphic design...
Okay. I'm not a huge fan of it. I wish they went more of the cyberpunk realm rather than what they went with in this one.
Yeah, see, I'm glad they didn't. Like, I don't know what it is about it. I just love the aesthetics of it. I think it's phenomenal. But it took the old game, put it in the Android universe, and thus the new living card game system was created, which we will be talking about a new change that Richard Garfield has made fairly soon.
Yeah, and it's actually probably my favorite Richard Garfield game, and probably one of your favorite Richard Garfield games.
It's up there.
When we get to it.
Yep. But speaking
the
of
next
yellow...
game on my list here, I don't know if it's on yours, is Ghost.
It is. Ghost.
It's designed, of course, by Richard Garfield and published by, from the picture here, Yellow, but there's actually quite a few publishers for this one.
It was first printed by Yellow.
About 8 different publishers from what I'm looking here.
Mm-hmm.
And this one I actually never heard of, never seen. It probably just fell under the radar because this has come the time. This one was printed, 2014, 2013?
Yeah,
this is when games are starting to get pumped out, and this is where games are going to start getting lost in the shuffle. And Ghost here, the way the description works, it's a fast to easy learn card game with a Halloween-based theme. It has twists and turns. You play your cards wisely to get rid of all the ghosts, undead, vampire, zombies, and other spooky creatures haunting your mansion. You block your opponents while they try to drive spirits out of their home and into your backyard. But beware, the scariest ghost will not be driven away so easily. So Ghost is a game basically to get rid of all your cards in your hand or in your mansion by playing a card or several matching cards equal to or higher than the ones you played previously. To set up, each player has, so it's basically card shedding.
Yep, that's exactly it.
Ghost cards come in 4 suits and have values ranging from 1 to 14. With a few cards have special powers. You got your scary red ghost, for example, that can be topped only by Fearless Ghost or other scary ghosts, or Ghost Quartet, while Fearless Ghost can be played no matter what's on the top of the cemetery discard pile.
Yeah.
The game consists of 2 stages. In the first stage, players draw or play cards to prepare their hands for the second stage, and on a turn, a player takes one of 3 actions. They play 1 or more matching cards on a cemetery equal to or higher than the cards played previously. Then refill your hand to 4 cards by drawing them from the crypt, which is the deck. Take all the cards from the cemetery into your hand. Any card being played on an empty cemetery. Any card can be played on an empty cemetery, and you draw 1 card from the crypt to try to play it. Taking all the cards from the cemetery into your hand if the play is invalid. Ouch.
Yeah.
So once the crypt is empty, which is the deck again, the second stage begins. Players take turns either playing valid cards into the cemetery or taking all the cards from the cemetery into their hand. If a player plays 2 or 3 matching ghosts, he takes another turn immediately. If he plays 4 cards that match or play cards that complete a quartet, those cards in the cemetery are removed from play, then he takes another turn. If the player hand is empty, he draws the top card from his mansion, playing it if valid and taking all the cemetery cards into his hands if not. If a player empties his hand in mansion, he's out and the other players keep playing. Play continues until only 1 player has cards in his hand. That player loses the game and everybody else wins.
Yeah. It's a classic game. You can tell he based it off a deck of cards
Yeah.
fairly obviously. But
Honestly,
no, this
this
looks fun.
intrigues me though. It's kind of like a trick-taking, hand-shedding game. You got to be smart how you control your hands, and yeah, no,
Yep,
I'd be interested in playing this if I ever found a copy in the wild.
absolutely. I mean, they don't look too expensive. I mean,
It's
some of the used
35
copies.
on Amazon from what I'm seeing over here.
Yeah, which is not too shabby. That's a little more than average. I've probably seen this at the used bookstore that we go to, so I will
Interesting.
definitely keep an eye out for it. I mean, knowing Richard Garfield's pedigree of making really neat board games or games based on classic ideas and making them really neat, I'm on board.
All right. Well, let's move on to
Treasure
what is it?
Hunter.
Treasure Hunter. Go ahead and talk about this real quick. I'm gonna step away.
All right, sounds good. So Treasure Hunter is a game made by Queen Games. One, I think, his first one going into this. This plays similar to a lot of his others that you'll see later on. It says, as the description, get as much valuable treasure and coins as you can while everything counts at the end of this 5 round game. Watch out for treasure that isn't treasure at all, and draft your team of treasure hunters wisely. You t- Only 2 treasures are available in each of the seasons, so get it while you can. In Treasure Hunter, players are placed on the game board first. Then all players are given a hand of 9 cards from which to draft, drawing 1 card and passing the others to the left or right depending on which round is being played. At the end of drafting, all players will have a hand of 9 cards and a little knowledge of what the other players have in their hands as well. All players must play all the cards or must play any and all cards from their drafted hand of 9 for each season they have collected for, whether they want to or not, or whether they want to on one of the treasures or not. So it's a drafting game, which we'll notice that. And I had an interesting theory about the drafting games that Richard Garfield has made and the ones that you'll see him make later on, which we're going to be talking about pretty soon. Drafting became a huge thing in the Magic the Gathering community. I mean, drafts became a form of tournament, definitely after this, because I remember drafts. I almost wonder if he took inspiration from Magic drafts and decided to make some card games based on that. That's just purely a hunch, but I can't help but think that.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised, and partly too, drafting games became quite popular in this era.
Yep,
So you had, I think, Blood Rage came out around this time. You had Medieval Academy around this time as well.
yep,
You had other drafting mechanisms. Seven Wonders was already very popular, but it was one of the first major ones that started doing that draft. So I just think it's one of those mechanisms that just kind of everybody's got to do one at that time. Like right now, everybody's got to do a roll and right or a flip and right
yeah.
type game. And I think back then it was during this time frame was drafting.
Yeah, that makes sense actually. Now that you bring it up, but yeah, I mean he's definitely in the forefront of really interesting drafting games.
And see, for me, this is interesting because it looks good. I do want to try it,
Uh
but
huh.
it's a Queen game. I like Queen games, but then I don't like Queen games. They're like a hit or miss with me sometimes. So
Right.
it's quite interesting when
It
it comes to
is.
it.
It is like every Queen makes a lot of games that you would want and yet you don't want at the same time.
Yeah. So like again, this is just saying something because I'm a Feld fan, but Merlin I really enjoyed. But we also played another Queen game. I think it was like Perfume or
Yep.
whatever it was. I didn't enjoy that one.
Right. And like we both kind of agreed. It's like yeah, it was okay for what it
Yeah.
was. It wasn't terrible. It
Beautiful production, just
great production. Yeah. Good
not
dice.
that
Good
good
quality.
a game.
Yeah. It was okay.
So
Yeah.
this one has me intrigued, but I'm a fan of another drafting game we'll talk about a little later from Richard Garfield, and so I'm like, is this like him learning how to make the drafting mechanism and then he makes it better for the other game? Because you see a bit of that sometimes in some of his earlier games where he tries something and then he implements it better in another game.
Exactly.
Like he did with Android. It was a CCG that he was like, okay, and then he put it in or Netrunner, and then he put it in Android Netrunner and made it a better game.
Exactly. Makes you wonder.
Yeah.
All right.
Speaking of re-implementation, the next one on my list is Hive Mind. We're only going to touch about this a little bit because we talked about
Mm-hmm.
what you were thinking.
Yep.
Basically, Hive Mind is a buzzworthy new party game about being alike. Up in the hive, the bees are trying to prove to the queen bee that they deserve to stay. During the game, the players must be harmonious in answering intriguing questions based on their experience and opinions. The more answers they have in common with the other player, the more points they get, represented by beepawns called beeples. Players move through the hive.
Beeples. Beeples, people. Think about this. Beeples.
Beeples. Those who score the fewest points each round must move closer to the hive exit. As soon as one or more bees exit the hive, the game ends. All the remaining bees win and survive the winter. Hive Mind is a game for as few as 3 players with as many as you want. It sounds more intriguing than what you were thinking. It sounds like they implemented a little bit better rules.
Uh-huh.
But it's the same thing. It really is, just on a bee.
On a B board. Well, this is part of the Titans of Gaming series from Calliope Games, which they did a Kickstarter for, and they wanted to get all of the best designers, and it seems similar to the idea of Stone Age, but they wanted to make their own games. And not Stone Age, you're right. Stonehenge. But they wanted them to use their own games, and while some designers just re-implemented some older games, some created new ones, but I've heard it's been kind of a mix for a series.
Yeah, that's what I heard too. I do have to say this is an actual really pretty game from some of the pictures that I'm seeing on.
Yeah, that's one thing Calliope does really well.
They do great art. One of my favorite Calliope games is probably one of the more simpler games, and that's Roll For It. I think that's an amazing game, so I'm intrigued to try this.
Uh-huh. Yeah, me too. I'm up for it. Let's look at our next one from AEG. The first one he's worked with AEG. Greedy Goblins. So, Greedy Goblins, I'm slightly familiar with it. I'm going to read the description though, because it is, if you play Galaxy Trucker or understand how that works, it's similar to that. You have a pile of tiles in the middle, and you're going to be taking them at the same time. So it's a simultaneous play, strategic tile placement, and bluffing game. Players lead a clan of goblin miners who want to gather the most valuable collection of gems. Coins are scored for gem tiles on the mines that you have claimed, with bonuses for dynamite tiles. But if there is too much dynamite, the mine and all the riches within are destroyed. That's your timer as you're playing. When you have a dynamite and you draw one up, you immediately show it and let everybody know. In more detail, players sit around a circle. Well, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it is a speed game where you're picking up these tiles, playing cards for their special abilities, and just trying to get the most points from set collection. It looks absolutely chaotic, and it actually looks really fun.
Yeah, it looks interesting. For me, simultaneous play is a little hit or miss. I mean, I just picked up a new simultaneous game, or pre-ordered one. We've already talked about it. So I'm interested. I do want to try this. It looks interesting. The art is interesting as well.
Yeah.
But no, I wouldn't mind playing it. I wouldn't mind trying it if someone owned it.
So
it's actually relatively cheap too.
Now, the question that I have for you, Daniel, actually those tiles that you're drawing, from what I understand, they're like Bakelite. They're plastic tiles, so they're really good quality. So the question I have for you is the fact that Richard Garfield made this. If this was some unknown designer, is this now more intriguing, like more wanting to play it, because Richard Garfield's name is on it?
I don't know. I'm into the thing where I'll try everything at least once, unless it's really is something I don't like social deduction. I'm not a fan of.
Yeah.
Even if Richard Garfield's name was on a social deduction game, I probably wouldn't play. I don't hate simultaneous play, that by any means. I'm just not really good at it, so I try to veer away from it.
Uh-huh.
Richard Garfield intrigues me, but I think the fact that it's called Greedy Goblins would intrigue me more, not Richard Garfield's name, just because I love that fantasy style stuff.
Cool. All right, that explains it.
So let's move on to the next game here I have on my list, which is a game by Z-Man called Spynet. And it's weird that I think it's like, oh, Richard Garfield is this very predominant designer, and I'm learning some of these games. Like, I've never even heard of Spynet, and it came out 3 years ago.
Yeah, I have heard of this one. It looks cool. Okay. I love the art on it.
The art looks cool. Don't get me wrong. I really dig the art on this. Just the cover alone intrigues me. So basically, you're a spy master. Your mission: dominate the world of undercover intelligence by deploying agents and complete vital missions. To complete your mission, you must first build an underground network of highly trained agents from different branches of espionage. It is a card game that's 2 to 4 players who work alone or with a teammate to gather the information they need to recruit the best agents and disrupt their opponent's plan. So basically, it's one or 2 to 4 player game, not 2 or 4. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Because it sounds like if you're playing a 4 player game, you got to split the thing, and I have issues with that, and I'll get to it after we're finished with the description.
Okay.
You can rise to the top of the intelligence community and become a dominant force in the world of covert espionage. The deck contains agents, funding, and missions. Players draft cards from a face-down lineup, look at the first pile, take it, or put it back in order to look at the second pile. You look at the second pile. After you take a pile, you add 1 card to an empty slot in the lineup, as well as each pile that you passed over, therefore enriching the haul for the next player. Players lay down color-coded agents in order to gain strength in 4 fields: tech, infiltration, counter-espionage, and enforcement. Funding can be applied to any agent, and some agents have their special powers that take in effect when played. The player can complete a mission only when their strength in that mission field is stronger than all other opponents.
Yep.
So it seems intriguing, and my issue with this 2 or 4 is this one doesn't seem to be a big problem with it because it's basically you're doing a lineup and everybody's drafting their own pool. My problem with it is I've never liked where you playing a 2 or 4 player game where you have to split the deck.
Right.
Basically, like what is it? Star Wars Risk, or I haven't played it yet, but I heard that's a big thing with Star Wars Rebellion, where it's a 2-player game, but they try to shoehorn a 4-player capability into it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Exactly. No, I agree with you on that. It's really just a 2-player game, but the way it looks in that drafting mechanism where you're looking at the piles and you're passing stuff up, like you have the knowledge going into it, but you don't know if you want to keep pushing what it's going to be, and the fact that everything that you push past is better for the next player. That's super intriguing. I love that idea. This one is with the combination of the art and that mechanism. I think like this one would be right up my alley personally.
Yeah, no, I think it will be too. The thing that bothers me a little bit is they're saying it's in the bluffing category, and I just don't like bluffing games. But this one seems like all the other stuff may make up for that. You know
I don't feel like this is a bluffing game other than like you look at the cards.
From what I've read, it doesn't feel like it because you're just playing cards and trying to be better than your opponent in the other pile.
Right, exactly. Because if you skip over a card, there's a good chance that they're going to look at it anyway. But they might not. You know, you never know.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. So I'll try it if I got it, and it's actually pretty cheap. You can find it for like $12.
Yeah, I'll probably pick this one up in the future. Which brings us to our next one. This is
another big one from Richard Garfield. This one had a following for a little bit.
Yeah, and it still does. There was a slight production. I wouldn't say it was an issue, but a lot of people do. And the board was small, and that's Bunny Kingdom. Yeah. And this, which I'm not gonna lie, this has one of the Dice Tower has made one of the funniest jokes I've ever heard about a board game because of this game. And in the game you have, I don't know, probably each player has about 50 bunny tokens. And there's
something like that,
they have a lot of them. And you're going to be placing them around the board based on cards that you draft. Well, you have a hand of X number of cards, I think 6 or 8, depending on number of players, and you draft 2 of them at a time. And the thing is with this game, every card is good to draft. There's no bad cards to draft. And it's an area control. You're trying to take up squares on the board, trying to get the most number of points based on where your bunnies are and the number of different resource types that you are controlling. So it can be pretty well thought after for each of your regions, because like if I have 5 bunnies and I have produced 4 different resources in the regions I'm controlling, that's 20 points right there. That's not insignificant. But then you also have objective cards that you're also drafting, and you also have special ability cards that you're also drafting. So, which is awesome. Normally in drafting games, you have an objective set on the side at the beginning of the game, and you're thinking, oh, well, I need to aim for this. No, you're drafting them in the game. There's no levels to that. I think that's awesome. But the joke that I was referring to is that because of how many tokens there are, Tom Vassell of the Dice Tower made this great joke where he was like, yeah, actually Bunny Kingdom only ships, they only produce it with 2 bunnies, but by the time you get it, you have all these bunny tokens. I still laugh about that. I've stolen that joke so many times. Yeah, it's awesome. But
yeah, it's a good game. I really enjoy it. It's probably not my least favorite, but it's the least favorite out of my favorites on here. I like it. There are some issues I have with it, but other than that, it's a very good game. I really do enjoy it. But I'll play King of Tokyo or King of New York before that. And I'll play the next game on our list.
Exactly. Our next game, would you like to take this one?
Is Keyforge, Call of the Archons. And this is published by Fantasy Flight Games, of course, as we're talking about Richard Garfield. He is the sole designer for this one. And the reason why I like this game is, one, it's a living card game more than it is a collectible card game, but it's neither one of those, because once you buy a deck, that's your deck. You can't add to it. You can't subtract from it. Well, you could subtract from it. It just would hurt your deck, and you can't add those cards to another deck, because each deck is its own deck, has its own procedurally generated name as well. Apparently, with the newest update, there are going to be evil twins of decks that are already played.
Yeah.
That are actually going to play somewhat the same, but quite uniquely from the original deck.
Yeah, I think the powers are going to be somewhat better, but they're also penalize you in a different way too.
Yeah, they'll penalize you. So yeah, I dig this game. There's about 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 main decks right now, with a 5th one coming soon called Dark Tidings or something like that.
Yep.
So yeah, they're and I like the fact that when every time a new one comes out, or a couple decks go out, a new deck comes in. So like in the next one, Dark Tidings, the Disc, which are the insect race, they're going out of the game and they're bringing in like the water race. So it's interesting how this works. It basically, you get your deck. Daniel over there has his own deck, and we play against each other. You're basically trying to light your key forges, all 3 of your cauldrons or whatever they're called. And the first one to light all 3 wins. And that's literally the first step of the round is, do you have enough, how do you pronounce it, Danny?
Aether?
Aether? If you have enough Aether to light your cauldron, you light it. That's it. And then you call out a house that
I'm sorry, not Aether. Amber.
Amber. You play your Amber to play your cauldron. If you don't have enough, then you move into the next step where you're playing your cards. The first thing you do is you have to call out a family. So each deck is built up of 3 families, or houses as they're called. And there are a wide variety of them now. There's 20? Something like that? There's a lot.
Yeah, well, there was 7 in the original set, and I want to say that each of the successive decks after that either trade out 1 or 2, so probably only about 14.
I wasn't far off.
No, like about 14 or 15. So after our last conversation about this, because you and I had a debate over Keyforge, I forget why we were talking about it. We were talking about.
I think it was 2-player games.
Yeah, more than likely. We were talking about the most recent set that just got released, Mass Mutation. Yeah. Because of that, I went out and I bought a couple decks.
I want to get some decks in Mass Mutation. That's the only thing because I want to at least have a couple decks in each of the boxes. So like I want to get the starter deck for the next Dark Tidings, just to have those decks in there, and I want to get Mass Mutation decks. Yeah. I have everything else now because you and me went a little crazy and bought a crap ton of cards.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I own more decks than I've played this game, which is silly.
I'm always down to play this game, but it comes to that crux. It's a 2-player game.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I feel like you and I could play this on over the interwebs pretty consistently.
Yeah, we could.
Now, the funny thing is about it, and you touched base on it, and why this is so intriguing. This is called a unique game from Fantasy Flight Games. And what that means is that every deck that you buy is going to be procedurally generated to be unique from any other deck that you can buy. So
some decks may have the same type of cards in them, but not every deck is going to be the same kind of deck. So I may have this character in my deck, and you may have this in your deck. You may not have one of the characters I have in my deck.
Yeah, exactly. And so even though we have the same factions, it'll be different layouts. Even if we had the same factions, we're going to have a different card layout.
Yeah,
So there's going to be
exactly.
different cards. And to help prove this point that they're doing this is that they create a brand new name and a unique illustration that's created through a computer and printed on the back of each one of these decks. And so I wanted to share, out of the two decks that I got, this one is one of my new favorite names. And I appreciate when it has a silly one. This one is called The Cobbler That Makes Fun of Fitness. That is the name of this deck.
Yeah, there's some random names in there that I just thoroughly love because they're just procedurally generated, so it's just hilarious at times.
Yeah, exactly. So it's one of those games where it fixed everything that was the problem with Magic. And so, like, some of the problems with Magic, let's talk about those. Not to put down Magic, but this goes into understanding how Richard Garfield
Deck building.
thinks.
That's
Yeah,
the big thing. Is
deck building is
the
big in
cost of
Magic.
deck building.
Yep, you don't have to deck build in this. In fact, you can't deck build in this. He said in a previous interview that I read online, he was like, no, you're thrown into the jungle. Here's your tool. Learn to use it. So
Yeah.
you need to learn how to use that deck, which is why it's interesting.
And what I like about it, and we joke about it, that we buy all these decks because we want to play with them. We enjoy it. But you don't have to. That's the thing. You can have your one deck and you learn how to play it quite well and still do well against other Keyforge decks.
Yep.
Sometimes because of the fact that it's procedurally generated, they're not completely balanced, but that's just because they try. The algorithm tries, but some decks are going to be more powerful than others. It's just what's going to happen, especially when you're doing computer-generated decks.
Right, but there's also a solution to that. If your deck is shown to be better or worse than the others, that's where chains come into play, where you're going to be drawing less cards for your opponent. It has
Yeah.
a built-in handicap mechanism for that. But then let's talk about the mana, because one of the big change that he made to other CCGs was that if you have too much mana or not enough mana for Magic, you're dead on arrival because you're just not playing anything. You're just sitting there waiting. In this, there is no mana. It's 36 cards. You choose what faction you play that turn. That's it.
And it's all dependent what's in your hand. But here's the catch to that, and I love this catch. Those factions that you choose to play, it's either the cards you get to play in the thing or that activate on the board. So you could have a plethora of cards on the board. Only that house gets to activate unless there's special cards that say otherwise.
Yep, exactly. Or they have an Omni ability. So, I mean, every problem that people had with Magic and even somewhat with the community, which I understand, and we've talked about a little bit before, that's pretty much solved with Keyforge. And so I always tell people, like, if you were a Magic player or you considered it but decided not to because of one of those reasons, Keyforge is your answer.
It is. It's funny because that was the big thing with Keyforge or with Magic. I always told you why I think Magic is a good game. I just don't like the community, and I don't like the deck building and the cost. We were talking about this was years ago, but one of the grand champions that won the big tournament had like a deck that was worth $100 and something thousand.
Yep.
And I'm like, that's just obscene for people to try to get into this game.
Yeah, it really is.
When people have $100,000 deck.
Oh, and let's talk about, like, you brought up with the procedurally generated. Let's say that it somehow creates a combination that's incredibly unbeatable, right? And you take it to tournament and you win. Well, you know what they do with that deck? Have I ever told you about this?
No.
So let's say I go into a tournament, like a grand national tournament, and I win using my deck. Well, that deck officially then becomes ascended, which means it is forged the keys. That deck has left the universe and it is now known as almost godlike, but it can never be used in tournaments again.
That's cool. I like that. That's the way it's like that counteract the $100,000 spend. It's like this was a really good deck. It was really powerful. It swept through everything. Well, now it's banned.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. It's like you've earned the right to say that you won.
You still can play with it. You just don't get to use it in tournaments. And I dig that. I really do dig that. I like Keyforge a lot. And going back to what I was saying about it with Magic, where I was like, the cost of it, getting into it, I don't know if I want to deal with the community because they creep my wife out. But then you're like, dude, you got to try Keyforge. Let me just do this here. And I just happened to pick up Keyforge for, I think it was $7 because it was on clearance. I'm like, all right, I'll give it a shot. It's
Yeah.
$7. There's a couple decks in here.
You finally begrudgingly listened to me, and you're like, fine,
And
I'll
then I
listen to a
played
game
it
you suggested.
so much so. The reason why I have so many decks is my wife liked Magic. She just did not like the community. There was
Mm-hmm.
issues with it. It's gotten better, especially at the comic shop that we played, where
Mm-hmm.
it's more fun than it is for like legitimate tournaments and stuff.
Sure.
They're. I have to say, and I'm going to shout it out. Zia Comics has done a phenomenal job making any game night, whether it's Yu-Gi-Oh, Magic the Gathering, or just board game night, very inclusive. They're very strict about their rules, and they will enforce their rules.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely. We
so
stand by
I think
that.
that's phenomenal. But back to the story, we played Keyforge, and she's like, I like this game. I like this a lot. And I'm like, yeah. So I ended up buying more decks. That's when we went through that big old splurge. You're like, hey, dude, I dug this game. It's cool. He's like, well, you see, there's this guy that's selling these bunch of decks. You want to go in with me?
That's how I get you, I suppose. Yeah, no, I mean, it's like I said, I own more decks right now than I've played it, and I enjoy the mess out of playing it.
I
And
own more decks than I played it. I've only played it 3 times, and I have
yep.
12, 14 decks.
But now, you know what's cool is, unlike collectible card games and TCGs, I could stop right now and I will have plenty to play for the rest of my life. You know, I don't need to continue buying cards to play.
Yeah, same with me. I can stop. I like getting the newer decks, but the thing with this one is that I don't have to go out and buy booster packs. I don't have to go buy that. I can buy a base set, and then I have everything I need for that new set.
Yep.
And base sets are not super expensive. So in essence, they come out with 1 or 2 a year. I'm paying about $30, $60 a year just to get some new cards in a deck. That's about it.
Exactly.
There's a couple, and it's not bad because they come four in a base box. It's like 4 factions per or 4 card decks.
So now it's different. The base box for the original Call of Archons set was 4 decks. 2 of them were random. Now they have 3 different price points. There's a single deck for $10. There is an advanced deck, which is $15, and it just comes with a deck plus the tokens one player would need. And then there is a 2-player starter set, which is $25. It comes with 2 decks and then enough tokens for 2 players.
Okay, that's pretty cool.
Super easy
do like
entry.
that. So like if you get like the 2-player deck with the tokens and everything, you don't need more tokens. Trust me.
Nope.
You buy 1, you have enough. I have
Yeah.
a ton of it because you gave me one of your like starter sets, one of the ones that were on Target on sale.
Yep.
I had the one that I bought. Plus, you gave me all the ones from a mutual friend of ours who was just getting rid of all his stuff.
Yep. And then I went ahead and bought the 2-player starter set for Mass Mutation just to see if there was any new tokens. But really, I have way too many tokens right now.
So I that's what I'm probably going to do is probably buy the 2-player box for Mass Mutation just to give me a couple cards in there, a couple decks.
Yep, exactly. That's all you need.
Yeah.
And you're going to have a good day of fun. So, Keyforge, awesome. Fantasy Flight, thank you for making that. I always love debating Keyforge amongst the Fantasy Flight games because it's not an IP game, finally.
Yeah, and I think a big part of it, we talked about it a lot, is that it's inclusive. Anybody can play it. It's really easy to get into. The only price point to get into it is buying that first box, and you can just buy a basic deck for $10. That's your price, but the lowest price point you can get to get into this game.
Yep,
You won't have the tokens or anything for that matter, but if someone else has the game, you can use their tokens.
So let's move on to it. We only have 2 more games left. Wow, this just flew by. And this was not a super long episode, but I'm glad we did it. Our next one is from Amigo, and it is called Carnival of Monsters, which absolutely stunning cover.
It really is a nice cover.
Yeah.
I know nothing about this game. It's relatively new, too, but I don't pay attention to Amigo like I should, because there's been a lot of Amigo games that I've enjoyed, a la Bonanza.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Everything that I've played from Amigo, I want to say there's been like 1 or 2 of like really older games that I was just disappointed in, but not that I disliked. I just didn't think it was as good as the other stuff. But now I buy games based on that Amigo title. Absolutely. So, the Royal Mythological Society counts amongst its members the most renowned and respected expert in monster lore throughout the entire empire. Each year, the society permits only a single new member to join, so applicants compete to prove their points with the most magnificent menagerie of monstrous beasts they can find and capture. To aid in these quests, the discovery of the society grants every aspiring monstrologist a small stipend, which they can use to hire additional experts and fund their journeys into the magical lands where the most exotic beasts reside. After 4 seasons of hunting, would-be members present their collections at the organization's annual banquet, and an event known as the Carnival of Monsters. So let's talk about how it actually plays. It is a card drafting game in which players try to collect land cards so that they can capture and display strange and exotic monsters, hire talented staff, and help run their enterprise and pursue their own secret goals. Points are awarded for displaying monsters, for completing goals, and earning gold crowns over 4 seasons of play. In the end, the player with the most profitable and spectacular carnival is the winner. So it's a drafting game.
So I have seen this. I haven't played it myself, but I have seen like reviews and stuff like this, and it intrigued me when I saw the reviews. I know it's hit or miss for some people. Some people like it, some people don't. Some people say it's a little chitty, a little finicky.
Yeah.
But I'm intrigued by it. This sounds actually quite interesting for a drafting game.
Yeah, from what I remember of the reviews is that there are times where you might just get hosed because of the draft. And it's not on purpose. That's just how it is. It looks really cool. The art looks stunning. Looks like a ridiculous amount of cards. I'm just gonna guess about 300. And that's an estimate, but there are a lot of cards in this picture. Let me see if I can pull it up without my computer freezing. I doubt it, but let's see.
Well, while we're trying to pull that up, I know we only have one more game left. I did pull up King of Tokyo Dark Edition just to explain the differences that this re-implemented.
Okay.
It's a collector's edition. There's only 100,000 copies in 12 languages of this version.
Only,
so
huh?
Only 100,000, but still, that's going to make it where people who are collectors are going to seek it out.
Sure.
It's alternative in a darker world, which struggles for the control of Tokyo, which has never been so fierce in Wicked. That's the description on here. Basically, the difference is there's deluxe components in the game, such as an embossed box and a lightning bolt-shaped energy. Lightning bolt-shaped energies, where instead of the cubes, it's lightning bolts, as well as new art by Paul Mafion. It's got the same King of Tokyo rules with an addition of a new mechanism exclusive to this edition, just to give it a little fresh play. I don't know what the new rule is because I haven't played this version.
I think it's like the disasters or something like that.
I think so, because there's some artwork on here. Now, don't get me wrong about this, and I know we joke about the fact that it's a collector's edition and there's only 100,000 copies. It is a gorgeous game from some of the pictures I've seen.
Yeah, it looks.
The dice are translucent.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, no, it. I don't know if I want to spend it, especially since I got the original copy. So.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't add too much to the new game, and none of the other stuff is technically compatible with it. Not that you really need to. I want to say you might be able to do the power-ups, but it depends.
Yeah. I'm not too worried about it. I have my King of Tokyo, so I'm happy.
Yeah. Now the next one, and the last one that most recently released from Richard Garfield, is Half-Truth, and he co-designed this with a gentleman named Ken Jennings. And if that name sounds familiar, he was all the rage on Jeopardy. Yeah. And so this, go figure, is about trivia. And so Half-Truth is a party game. Oh, I'm sorry, I read the last one. Do you want to take this one, Daniel?
Sure. Half-Truth is a party game for all ages and people, created by the legendary game designer Richard Garfield and the 74-time Jeopardy winner Ken Jennings, with art by well-known artist Ian O'Toole. Basically, it comes with 500 trivia question cards, and each card has a category on it, like animals with blue tongues. There are 6 possible answers, 3 right and 3 wrong, and the players have to place bets on answers they believe are correct.
Yeah, so this is neat. Like, it has a bit of push your luck in it. I was looking at the review for it, and the way it essentially works is that you should be able to figure out at least one of them, right? I mean, it's animals that have blue tongues. Well, if it has a dog, okay, I know if my dog doesn't have a blue tongue. So I would probably put that as...
with blue raspberry.
Huh?
Something with blue raspberry.
Right, exactly. And so the idea, you will get more points if you bid on more stuff, but if you get any one of them wrong, you do not get points. So there's your push your luck, is 3 of them are true, 3 of them are not true. So animals with blue tongues, that's a perfect example. If you, there's like, one might say a bird. It's like, well, I know this bird definitely has it, so I'm going to bid on that. But do I know about these other 2? That's what makes this really intriguing.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of push your luck. I like that idea. And yeah, that's a cool little concept. And 500 cards, holy cow. That's a lot. I mean,
it's intriguing, don't get me wrong, but the fact of the matter is it's a trivia game. So it looks like a cross between Trivial Pursuit and what is that one? Wits and Wagers, where you're betting on the right answer.
Sure.
So I want to try it, but I don't know if it's something that I need to go out and get, in a sense. You know what I mean? Because trivia games just don't play very well unless they got a twist, like Wits and Wagers.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the twist in this is the fact that, like, I can try and go for the glory and get more points by getting all of these, right? But also the truth of the matter is, if you know all of the knowledge and I'm playing with someone who doesn't know all the knowledge, I have an advantage. And that's where, like, Wits and Wagers has its benefit, is that it's, you don't need to know
the answer spot on, but hey, you can bet on something you think is the right answer. You could be like, hey, Danny knows magic. He probably knows this answer. Maybe I'm going to bet on what he says.
Yeah, exactly. And so that doesn't quite solve that problem, but overall, I think this looks like a really fun game. I would definitely try it. And that wraps it up for Richard Garfield for us.
And so I just pulled up Keyforge Dark Tidings real quick, not to talk about it, but I wanted to explain the Evil Twin deck and how it's going to work.
Sure,
and
go for it.
It has the description in here for those who are interested. So the way this works is the Evil Twin decks are going to work like this. If you open up a deck and it says Speaker Domitia's Evil Twin, that deck is the exact copy of Speaker Domitia, a real deck that has been printed and can be found in another player's hand around the world. The difference is that the Evil Twin deck, many of your creatures look a little different. Specifically in Dark Tidings, many creatures have Evil Twin variants. And if you find an Evil Twin deck, every creature with an Evil Twin variant appears in that form. These Evil Twin creatures feature new artwork, graphic design, and abilities, making them a significant departure from the original creatures. And as we discussed earlier, they're very powerful, but there's also a negative knock to you. That, like, say, if you use this card, gain 5 chains.
Yep, exactly. See, I'm super intrigued by just the meta of that. Like, if I want to get an Evil Twin deck, and so that way I can somehow try and find whoever has the non-Evil Twin version of it.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's interesting. I really want to see it. I want to see if I'm going to be able to pull an Evil Twin deck, because I'm not going to buy a lot into Dark Tidings. I may just buy one big box, the big box set.
Well, it also
to have, like, different. Huh?
Yeah, go on. Sorry.
And it's not going to come out till 2021 from what I'm seeing here. So they're doing the Mass Mutation this year, and next year will be Dark Tidings.
Yeah. And then they're also going to be bringing out a new mechanism with Dark Tidings, which is the Tide, where certain times you can gain control of the Tide and then or have a high Tide, and then the other player has low Tide, and therefore it either penalizes them or gives you a benefit, depending on the cards.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to it. Also, what we're trying to tell you people is play some Keyforge. You might enjoy it. If you like Magic, try this game out.
Yep, exactly. I think people will like it overall. And with that being said, that was Richard Garfield. What do you take from going over his games?
He's the king of CCGs, especially in the early part of it.
Yeah. And drafting games at this point.
At this point, he's done quite a few drafting games. A lot of his games I'm intrigued by. I do want to try Robo Rally. I've heard there's issues with it, like the way the programming works with it. So I'm hoping it's not as bad as I think it's going to be, but I'll try it. Other than that, every game on this list that I like, I've played of his. The only one that I want to try is Monster Carnival.
Yeah. Yeah, Monster Carnival sounds really fun. I want to try that. I want to try Spynet. That's the one I really want to try.
Yeah, I mean, Spynet seemed interesting, and I'll try it if someone has it, but it's not something I'm going to go out of my way to look for.
Yeah, which is understandable. Cool. Well, then that goes over Richard Garfield games. If you want to contact us directly, you can email us at everydayboardgames2020@gmail.com.
You can also find us on Twitter at EBG Podcast 2020. And in that podcast, we have a link to all our social media / streaming services and stuff like that. There is a pinned tweet that you can find us on YouTube, Twitch, as well as Podbean.
Speaking of Twitch, if you ever want to watch us film one of these live and join in on the conversation, you can join us at twitch.tv/everydayboardgames. We typically film on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Times vary.
As well as you can find the re-uploads of every podcast that we record live on Twitch on YouTube at Everyday Board Games 2020. And that's also on now a Monday, Wednesday, Friday upload schedule, as well as the audio versions on Podbean, Everyday Board Games Podcast. And that as well is on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday upload.
So with that being said, we want to thank you for tuning in. I've been Daniel.
And I've been Daniel.
And thank you for tuning in to Everyday Board Games Podcast.
Have a good one.